Your best people don't usually leave loudly. They leave quietly and gradually and long before that resignation hits your inbox. In this week's show, we'll talk about what's really behind losing talent, what most organizations are already trying, why that might not be working, and how to build a more human and sustainable way to keep and grow your people. Welcome to the Career Equation, a practical formula for career conversations that helps businesses and their leaders to engage, retain, and grow their talent.
Hosted by Erica Sosner, Career Equation creator, and Zoe Schofield, careers expert and equation enthusiast. Hi Zoe, it's great to see you again. Welcome back to the Career Equation podcast.
Hello and hello 2026. We're well into it now already. Great to be back with you, Erica.
Yeah, it was really nice to be back. And I've been working recently on the Good Housekeeping column, which has been really great fun. I really feel like there's a lot of energy in 2026 for career changes, for pivots, for deepening expertise. There feels like a real momentum for people this year about making their careers all that they want them to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's something, isn't there, about what's shifting and changing in 2026. And I know I read something the other day about we'll have the year of the horse coming up in from February 2026. And that's all about new chapters and new beginnings. And that definitely feels kind of current in our household. We've got my daughter, pretty much, over halfway now through her year 3 of uni, her final year at uni. And so we've been having conversations over the winter about, what might we be doing next? What might you want to experiment and try? And I'm really trying to help her to remember that it is a period of experimentation still, that she doesn't have to have any final answers about what she wants to do or to be, and that it's about experimenting and learning and continuing to find out about yourself at this stage. So yeah, that's what we've been talking about, new beginnings.
New beginnings and choice making in your career as well. That's our subject of the day, really, is to start off our reflections in the new series of the podcast, giving you a kind of recap about why and how career conversations might find their places in your organization. And we thought today it might be useful to kind of zoom out and to talk a little bit about what's going on when we lose talent, because whether you are HR, talent manager, senior business leader, our clients tell us again and again, of course, that this is the most painful part and the part that they most want to be able to stem and address and recognize the business benefits of having people growing and evolving through your organization. So I thought we'd start off by just talking a little bit about what we think is really happening when you get that unexpected resignation. And I think that most organizations, when we talk to them about why they are losing people, will say things like, we didn't have the promotion available, we didn't have the role available, they were anxious about where they were going and they got a better offer elsewhere. So a lot of the time, the assumption is that it is primarily about opportunity to grow, to become more senior, to make more money, to have more exposure. And that certainly does happen sometimes. Like, wonderful opportunities do come people's ways that would be shiny and they'd be crazy to say no to. But as you said at the top of the show, Zoe, it's actually rarely that kind of bombastic in terms of why it is that somebody decides to move on. Certainly when they're looking around and they are scanning the horizon that they're in, people tell us, first of all, I don't know what it's reasonable to ask, where I could go next, how I might navigate this environment for the best. And they become increasingly isolated and disconnected and worried because they feel for one reason or another they've outgrown the role that they're in, or they feel there's a misalignment, or they want to do something next, but they just don't know where and how they might start that conversation. And in some ways, it feels easier to start that conversation outside of the organization than inside of it. So it's our premise that actually the money, the status, whatever, is actually secondary to the first problem, which is I want to talk about who I am and where I'm going, but I don't know where to do it within this environment. And this kind of gradual sense of like disconnection, the sort of attrition of the relationship between the individual and the role and the organization happens very gradually. It happens as they start to see their future, their aspirations, their hopes, and the current reality seem to have a gap that they don't think they can get over. So what does that look like? Things like a very capable employee becoming less engaged in like meetings, workshops, innovation. They're saying less and less. They're withdrawing. A high performer who's still delivering according to all their KPIs, but somehow seem to have lost their spark, their kind of mojo, their sort of magic and engagement with the organization. The manager who's assuming that because someone isn't saying that there is a problem, isn't therefore recognizing that maybe there is something that's missing for this person. So, we're busy as managers and leaders, and it's easy to feel that if there's no problem voiced, then there is no problem. But it may well be the case that silence isn't necessarily about consent and satisfaction. On the HR side, of course, you're seeing like retention numbers taking a dip, but you can't quite get to like what exactly is that's going on. Can't necessarily specifically pin it to something that's going on with the organization. And the numbers are telling a different story to what exit interviews and manager dialogue are telling you. And the easy exits, the surprise resignations, when someone resigns and everyone's like, I really didn't know that was coming. So in all sorts of ways, there are kind of indicators, precursors that might suggest to you that some of your key people are on the move, but in a kind of busy, loud environment where we don't necessarily have a methodology for staying close, we can easily miss those cues.
Absolutely, Erica. And I think there's definitely then some kind of, if we look behind those things, some common patterns at play here in terms of why people might be leaving. So, we'll have things like people really not seeing a future for themselves, not just because, to your point, that there's no promotion or there's no salary increase, but more because there's just no conversation about what they want or where they see themselves. So they don't see a future. I think there's also probably some patterns around people feeling a little bit invisible. Like, nobody's really asking me what I care about, what matters most to me. No one's hearing my story. People are making assumptions about me. They're not really based on what I really want and need from the work that I do and from the life that I want. So that definitely comes in to play, I think, as well. They're not sure if there is a future for them in the firm, that does it align with their aspiration, they don't, because the company doesn't know what their aspirations are. And so we're not seeing that commonality between, this is what the business needs, but this is what I need. And there's common ground here too. Maybe they can see other people getting ahead and they're like, why aren't I making the same progress? Perhaps I'm getting a little bit suspicious here about what's going on behind the scenes in the organization. And there's favorites at play. What is it about them? And what do you know about them? What is it about me? And why am I not getting on? So there's definitely some of that will be at play for some people. And maybe for some, it's actually become a bit boring or transactional. And it's just the daily task, the performance metrics. There's no sense of perhaps individual or personal growth or meaning from like, what am I doing, and seeing the impact of my work in a way that really matters with me. So perhaps they don't feel aligned, their strengths, their values, or maybe their aspirations don't map to what they're doing in their role or what the team offers or what they're producing. And this might be because there's been some shifts in the organization. Perhaps there's been some mergers, reorganizations, shift in direction or purpose. So it's not necessarily somebody's fault that they no longer feel aligned, but things have moved. And so they don't feel like they're playing to their strengths, their gifts and their talents, perhaps. And let's face it, sometimes there can be misalignment with the manager as well. That direct relationship can really make or break performance and satisfaction at work. So I guess, put simply, there's no real curiosity about them as an individual, or the environment and role have become less aligned with them. Perhaps the leadership and management have less rapport than they've had previously. So a number of things can be really at play here about what are the patterns that are causing people to leave the organization. And let's not forget that maybe they have been lured away by some bright, shiny new opportunity that they might want to grab at. There's definitely more that we can do to keep them in the business and to help them see that there is a future within the firm before they're lured away. And all of these things and all of these patterns can be very costly to the business, can't they, Erica, in terms of like when these, resignations and exit happen, then it can be really costly.
And look, I expect, given our listeners, that we are preaching to the choir, but it's worth re-emphasizing what the costs are of losing talent or having high attrition, high turnover. And, time and time again, these are the people that we've placed large investments in, that our clients, have invested in high caliber mentoring, leadership and development programs, perhaps professional training and accreditation, only for that person to then take all of that learning and development and expertise and kind of the sort of organizational memory elsewhere, sometimes even clients as well, right? So we know that that is costly on so many different levels. It erodes team morale and reduces institutional knowledge. So valuable people leaving, it doesn't just impact the organization in general or the manager that they work for who now needs to find a replacement. It actually impacts the whole team that they were part of, their morale, their workload, their own individual circumstances. It impacts clients and therefore business continuity if they had a strong relationship as a trusted advisor working alongside some key clients. And it impacts everybody else that then needs to work alongside that gap until it's filled, and the new person taking their time to build competence and capacity and credibility, filling in the gap that the person has left. So all of those things present a risk of even more departures as well. And then you've got the hiring, the onboarding, the recruitment, the lost productivity, the training, getting somebody on board who's perhaps an unknown if they haven't come through the internal mobility program. And that these things are expensive in both time and money. So doing that when you're still feeling quite scarred by a departure can be really difficult and isn't necessarily the optimal environment to make good hiring decisions in. And then you've got reputation stuff. You don't want to be perceived as an organization that doesn't care about people's growth and development. And this internal and external reputation as an employer of choice, as someone that attends to people's futures in an environment that cultivates careers. And perhaps also whether you've articulated a career philosophy or you haven't, to what extent you keep that promise has significant implications for your reputation as a desirable place to work and as an employer of choice. So if people are leaving with greater frequency, what does that say about the rest of us? What does that say about our culture? What does it say about the opportunities that exist here? And places like Glassdoor and Trustpilot can have a really big impact on what people believe to be true, as well as, of course, the conversations that take place informally and in person about the world of work and the environments that you're in.
Yeah. And I think people don't, let's face it, leave companies for no reason at all. They're leaving because of either poor culture, lack of rapport with their manager, poor leadership, misalignment with who they are. They rarely leave after just one bad day. And it's like, oh, today's been terrible, I am off somewhere new. It's when nothing meaningful or heartfelt has been said for a long time, when they feel that their next level of growth isn't possible in the firm. So I think that's really important to hold on to. It's not an overnight decision for people, rarely anyway.
And if you look at the data over and over again, well into the sort of 50 to 60% of why people leave organizations is career development. And that's an overwhelming, considering all of the range of reasons that there could be, that is a huge chunk of people. And what do they mean? When they talk about career development, because obviously organizations know this and they want to invest time and energy in people feeling like their careers are progressing. And yet there's something of a mismatch between what they're trying and the result that they're getting, which means that it isn't quite hitting the mark. So what do you think, Zoe? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, you're right. Most organizations are not doing nothing. They're not like asleep at the wheel, paying no attention to what's happening in the workforce. They are trying things, and there are often real attempts to curb that sort of exit flow. And you yourselves in your organizations have probably tried many of these too. The sorts of things that you're doing when you feel really under pressure around your retention figures. You may have tried things like pulse surveys that often land, though, sometimes with a bit of a thud in the inbox or a bit of a sort of, oh, gosh, what have I got to fill in now? Why are they sending this to me? What's really going on underneath? What do they mean by all of this? So lots of these things we want to talk through now are not bad things. It's just done, if they're done in isolation or without an understanding of why they're happening, then it can backfire on you a little bit. You know, things like engagement surveys or scores that are being tracked on dashboards might look really snazzy, but we might be missing some of the key information about why people are genuinely leaving. Maybe we're doing well-being initiatives that really try to ascertain and positively impact, I guess, how people are feeling, but maybe they're not hitting the mark in isolation on their own. Perhaps we've got learning platforms that are filled to the brim. We've seen America, haven't we? Where they're really snazzy. They're full of super content, but it's just not being utilized because people don't know how to access it or why they should access it. So they're not buying into the, why do I want to use my time and energy on this thing in this platform? We've seen things before like one-off development or leadership days, but there's no follow-up from that sometimes around how do we embed what we're learning on those days? How are we checking in around performance and well-being? And are they just sort of isolated one-off tick box exercises and not really felt, you know, in a sort of felt sense with an individual? And, you know, and the other thing that often happens, that I've definitely seen this in organizations I've worked with, Erica, and no doubt you have as well, is that the exit interviews, which we know is when it's too late really to have the conversation. But even then, the exit interviews are poorly designed, managed and delivered. So we're not even at that point getting the real truth about why somebody might be leaving and what we could do differently going forward. You know, in reality, I think HR are often doing their best, but working off raw data and not real dialogues about why. So I think those things come into play definitely.
So here's the real nub of the issue for us. We don't think that that individuals are leaving your organization because you haven't got in place great learning and development, you know, accreditations that really advance their career, amazing networks, perks, opportunities. We think that potentially they are leaving because they don't see a future there. And they don't see a future there because your philosophy around careers it could be non-existent, needs quite a bit of work, or just doesn't match up to the reality. And in the vacuum of that, they are going to take action to alleviate their discomfort about not knowing where their career is going. So from a leader reality and perspective, you know that you want to improve retention, that you want to keep your best people. But often when we ask you, so who would I talk to about careers in your firm, and what's the philosophy about how careers work, and, you know, 21st century world of work, what does that look and feel like? That isn't always clear. So for a leader, that's your first piece. Do I know what I want to be saying about what careers should look and feel like at our firm and what we do about that? When it comes to the do and the process, I think then the issue is often, when we talk to clients, it tends to land with the managers. So they tend to say, I want the manager to be able to talk about career conversations. That's absolutely valid, but actually everybody needs to be equipped to talk about careers in the right way, in the right time. So without a clear philosophy, and that philosophy then being informed by a model or approach, and then a structured process to support that, it's one thing to say it, but actually the doing of it still feels quite amorphous and uncomfortable. And most people don't have a clear philosophy and a clear approach for how to think about their own individual careers, let alone if their organization also doesn't have a philosophy. So that's the second part, is do you have a process that is structured and meaningful and everyone understands, that gives them a place and space to talk about where they want to go in their careers? And without those things, there's a kind of feeling that everyone is doing a lot of things, but nothing is really happening in relation to the individual and their career growth. So perhaps there's a bit of a mismatch between what their perception is of the promise and the opportunity within your organization, and how that's aligning with a changing world of work. So none of these things, none of the initiatives that Zoe talked about are, of course, bad things. We want to have all of those things. But actually, for people to really capitalize on the career development opportunities that exist in the organization, they first need to have clarity about where those opportunities could take them and who they are and what they're bringing, and whether there is alignment between the business's goal and the individual. And in the absence of that, they will go and seek that outside of your organization. And that's where it gets dangerous. The career conversation starts happening with recruiters. It starts happening with the competition. It starts happening outside of your locus of control. And we think that this is the missing piece that most organizations could easily fill and really add value and get a lot of juice out of, drive better retention and engagement. And we see that happen all the time, and not therefore misallocate funds, investment and energy on things that don't actually move the needle for an individual feeling like their career is progressing. So, an engagement survey won't really tell you what someone is really afraid of in relation to their career. A learning platform won't give you the answer to what a person's real ambition is. And a wellbeing budget won't solve the problem of a lack of meaning within work. So we really need to be able to, if you like, have a lot more intimacy in our dialogues and in our culture as it relates to what you want out of your career and the great opportunities that exist here. Because, time and time again, especially like the larger the organization is that we work with, the more entities it has, and potentially, therefore, the more siloed it becomes. Strangely, you'd think the opportunities would explode as a result. The career opportunities, the career moves internally would explode as a result of that breadth and that range. But actually, what we find again and again is people don't even know where to start in terms of thinking about internal moves or pivots. Development, promotion's a bit more straightforward. What you want is if you can keep people within your group as they grow and mobilize, that's still a big win for the organization as opposed to them going to the competition. Very, very often I hear people who are just completely overwhelmed by choice. They've got no way of really knowing what's going on across the other parts of the business. The philosophy isn't clearly demarcated, and therefore the who to go to and what to do next when you're thinking about a change is also not embedded. And the cost is that people disappear.
Yeah. And I think, what we want to emphasize here is that quite often people don't know how and when to talk about their career with their managers. They're not sure when the right moment is. And organizations, the managers and mentors, don't necessarily know how to help them. So they don't feel equipped and confident to have those conversations. And sometimes even if the organization knows how to help them, if they haven't really truly asked and explored what matters to them, then we can be making all kinds of wrong assumptions and trying to fit sort of square pegs in round holes, etc. So if you don't know why people are moving on, you could be wasting valuable effort and time on the wrong fix. And it could be a lot more simple than you expect. So we don't need to overcomplicate this. It's about, as you talked earlier, about having a good philosophy in place and a model and approach that feels really simple and practical, but incredibly valuable to everybody in that conversation, whether you're the employee exploring what matters most to you or the manager trying to hear what that is and to understand the person in front of you better. So we don't want to overcomplicate it, but we definitely want to have something that's tangible and valuable in place.
And look, there is a skill set as well for doing it. There's a reason why managers avoid these conversations when they don't necessarily feel equipped or they feel like it's going to go into a realm of discussion that they're not comfortable with. To give you some examples from the one-to-one coaching that we do, I had someone recently wanting to structure a conversation about discussing a raise because they had been doing two jobs. They had taken someone's mat leave and been running with the two of them and performing in them over a couple of years, and were completely shut down by their manager when they tried to initiate that conversation. Were told this wasn't the time or place, that it would happen at a different time. There was no follow-up. And, that person has now moved on to a different organization as a result of that. Another example of a very senior, very valuable person within an organization, an investing organization, where they very, very much wanted to keep him. But when I started to talk to him, it was clear that there was a real toxicity and difficult dynamic with his manager that he had raised with the board on numerous occasions. And that was kind of, no action was was taken around that. So it was really stymieing his ability to feel like it was a culture that he could feel part of. Or another client who actually, like, on paper got the like promised dream role. You know, it looked like it was really going to be that role of her career, but actually once she was there, it was very, very difficult to navigate environmentally to get the kind of results that she was hired for, and that was really distressing. So, you know, career discussions are not just about how can I get to the next linear stage, and they aren't just about how do I navigate a squiggly career, if that's the direction they're taking. They can also be about some of the things that environmentally really getting in the way of someone performing, the kind of structured support that they might need, attending to where they want to get to and where the business says they want to get to, but something is getting in the way of that. It's about being able to have meaningful and open dialogue about their aspirations, about the challenges, and about how the business can support and nurture that, as much as it is about a more linear next step. So it's not surprising to me that without a process and modality for that those conversations are avoided and the business benefits then not reaped by the organizations.
Your kind of examples there just spring to mind. One of my recent clients, Erica, who works in a public sector and was at a sort of the twilighty latter stages of career, but still very much sees lots of years ahead, worked her way up and doing a job brilliantly, kind of fallen out of love with it and doesn't know why. And so is thinking, should I go and do something completely different? But actually, when we stripped it back through just a conversation about, you know, what matters, what we're loving, what we're not enjoying, why, and those sort of things behind that, it's just about a conversation to realign themselves and actually to hand over some pieces of work to others that would really value that growth, actually, and to feel it's okay to let go of some pieces of work and to realign with the things that do really matter going forward. So what felt like a conversation at the beginning about should I go, am I done here, has actually sort of reignited what she wants to do going forward, but now will feel more confident to have that conversation in the business. In that case, the business probably wasn't equipped to have that conversation, unfortunately. It was too much about, is it about promotion or is it about changing your hours, when that isn't what was at the heart of it at all.
Yeah, and often we find that people leave quite reluctantly. They would have much preferred to be able to speak their mind, and for everyone to be doing adulting about, you know, the world of work and careers and where that can take you. And you know, they're quite sad that wasn't possible, because obviously when you move on to something new, you do lose the network of friends and expertise and familiarity and community that you build up in an organization that you may really love, you know. So what can we do? How can we help people to start to think about getting to the heart of this matter and thereby shifting and growing the retention figures?
You know, and a career conversation is a structured opportunity to reflect on with your talent where they've been, where they are now, where do they want to go next, in that real spirit, as you said, about transparency and that kind of grown-upness. Like, it's okay to have this conversation, and that way they can share what they see as their sort of next progression or experience that they're looking for. And you can have much more information about what they do truly want to see, what they want to do, what they want to experience within the business. And when they have that kind of personalized conversation where they see the business has invested in their success and really does truly care, you know, career decision making becomes much more of a collaborative discussion and less individual. And the decisions that they make off the back of that are done with much more clarity and openness. I always say, if throughout a process of a wonderful career conversation that's engaging and over a period of time, somebody still leaves the business, that doesn't mean you failed necessarily. It means that they're making the right decision for them in that moment at that time. And actually, people who exit the business but exit in a really structured and well thought through and supportive way means they could well come back. And when they come back, they bring everything that they've learned with them. But if they leave on poor terms or a poor exit, they're less likely to see your organization as a continuing organization that might play a role in their future. And I think that's really important to remember. You know, we have to face it. If those conversations about people's aspirations and their desires are not happening in the business with you, they will be speaking to the competition. And that's never a good thing, because that does mean exits without your knowledge, understanding, or ability to change that destiny. Let's move towards a bit of hope and clarity. And that's precisely, isn't it, Erica, why the career equation method came along, to help people. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt that looking at engagement data in the organizations I was working with, that it was clear that the individual really wanted to talk about their career, that actually the organization wanted to better understand in terms of like succession and investment and matching development opportunities, what people wanted out of their work, and that there was a bridge that was needed to facilitate that conversation. And I found that through like hundreds over the years, I've been a career coach since 2004. So hundreds of conversations, both with the individuals and with managers and leaders around them, that there wasn't a kind of simple, practical structure that people could universally adopt that would allow for these kind of powerful and valuable conversations where we're not talking about making false promises. We're not talking about becoming an internal recruiter, but we're just creating a space to talk about this significant investment of time and energy that we all make in our career. And I think vitally, from an organizational perspective, our sort of large group workshops around the equation and career conversations really came about because companies said, we really want people to feel like they can take ownership of their career, that they can speak about it with clarity, and they can work alongside us in a spirit of collaboration to make the most out of their work, and for us to make the most out of their work. And that's really where the equation came about, was a kind of, what are the key elements that this conversation should address? And the sort of four components really that came out again and again when I talk to people about their careers were, I want to play to my strengths. I want to do more of the things that I'm good at and get better and better, more masterful at those things as I progress in my career. That I want to do that in a subject area that is exciting, meaningful, energizing, or an environment that is energizing to me, that suits my personality, that gives me pleasure as a result of doing that thing, whether that is solving tricky problems or connecting individuals to one another, or creating beautiful buildings, right? You know, the third thing was then that people want to measure their impact and their success in different ways. And they wanted to be clear that the work that they were doing was going to give them that feeling of success if they did it well and applied their skills to an energy and enthusiasm that they had. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly in the equation, we say that environmental fit can make all of the difference. So are they in an environment that supports them to do their best work? An environment can be everything from the place that you work to the speed that you work to, whether you're a generalist or working more deeply and specifically on something, who you work with, what kind of projects you work on, the quality of the coffee. All of those things are environment. So the equation became skills plus passion plus impact, which is what tells you who are you looking at and what matters to them, multiplied by environmental fit squared, which means that in making sure that you amplify the best level of fit around who you've got in front of you, because that can make an exponential difference to how they perform. And so you see that the career equation is perhaps a bit different to where career conversations might be in our listeners' heads, which tend to be things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? All of which is okay. But actually, we're more talking about, who is this person? What are they designed for? And to what extent are we maximizing that insight to help them feel like they're really going somewhere, and to help us feel like we've really got some fantastic talent that's being fully utilized? And in later episodes, we're going to go through in detail what the agenda of a career conversation structured around the equation might be. But what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit of a story about how does this work in practice then, and how does it make a real difference? So a client we've been working with now for really some years, probably at least like 9 years, is Dassault Systèmes. Dassault Systèmes is a high-tech firm headquartered in Vélizy in Paris. And like many technical expert environments, they prioritized and focused on the acquisition of technical skills and technical expertise. And that was the way that you progressed and were respected and got promoted. And they had a very well-structured kind of internal university around skills pathing rather than career pathing that helped people to understand the kind of skills they were likely to need in order to move into new and different roles across the business. They were also a business who'd grown a lot through acquisition. So there were all kinds of interesting, from like games firms to CAD design firms, all kinds of funky businesses that were joining the family all the time, but individuals weren't necessarily aware of those opportunities and broadening out. What the business wanted to do was to make sure that people did feel able to navigate their career within that complexity, that they were able to do less conventional career moves than felt like they had permission for previously. And therefore, they were going to need to help both managers and recruiters internally to think a bit differently about internal talent and creating opportunities for those people rather than by default going externally because the skills philosophy said, I need to have someone who already has this particular experience, rather than we can grow and cultivate those skills and experiences within our internal talent. So some of the things that we did with Dassault were, first of all, to raise awareness around how the equation works. So we did a lot of large scale, shortish broadcasting sessions that allowed people at all ages and stages of the career, all different job families, to engage via a kind of careers week intervention about thinking about their careers and their lens through the career equation philosophy. And that generated a lot of kind of awareness and conversation and made it easy for people to start to talk about this particular framework and how their thinking about their career operated within this framework. We then did a bit more deep diving, particularly for specific communities. So for women, for technical talent, for new grads and apprentices, to really dive into being able to structure their thoughts in a conversation about who they are, where they've been, what they'd like to be experiencing, what they'd like more of and less of, and the kind of support they'd like from the organization. And then we did the mirror version of that, working alongside managers and mentors and HR and internal coaches and business leaders who were interested in coaching around career, to have lots of people available for you to have that sounding board discussion, not just with your manager, but with anybody who had a vested interest in your success. And over time, they've been tracking now impacts for around 5 years. We've seen a threefold increase in internal mobility at senior level, at sort of C-suite and the couple of levels below. Much more internal growth and less of it coming from outside, as a result of people shifting their perspectives about the more we know about people, the more we can cultivate the development plan to have the right people in the right place who already know and are invested in our business, rather than the uncharted territory of someone from outside. And we've also seen a massive reduction in the attrition for early careers, where there were a lot of pressures in place in the structure and in the development programs to make a decision around specializing, but without a career methodology to start really thinking about early where I might want to be, how I find that out, what's going on across this business. It became very anxious making for people to make that decision. And the decision would then become, I'm going somewhere else, which was not at all what the business wanted. But alongside our own, training and development for the managers, the coaches, the individual, we also work with the organization to think about how they introduce their career philosophy and how that might need to shift in how they articulated it, what kind of process documents and struts might need to be available, and what kind of rhythms and rituals, having things in the diary just makes it easier for us to do the thing, right? Might work as a kind of ecosystem to embed career conversations and career conversations using the equation as the default way that the business benefits. So we continue to see genuine benefits and evolutions, different kinds of conversations happening around recruitment, lower levels of attrition as a result of embedding career dialogue as an important element of acquiring, keeping, developing great people and cutting edge skills.
Absolutely. And I think what's so wonderful, and I think about Dassault as well, is that it becomes the language by which they have conversations about careers. So it is the career language. The equation is that simple and practical that you can't kind of unknow it once you know it. So it sort of sits in, it's whether you're a manager having a conversation, it's there in your mind because you've used it and seen the benefit of that, of using the tool in conversation. And for employees, once you know the equation yourself, you're equipped with it for life. So it helps you always make decisions and choices about your next move with more clarity because you've got that in your mind's eye, if you like, as you're thinking through those options. So if you've been listening to this, you might have been noticing or thinking a few things yourself about what have we already tried? What's not still really shifting for us? And where are we feeling stuck? Maybe you're thinking we're a bit stuck or frustrated in what you have been doing. So before you go, let me just kind of plant a bit of sort of seeds, if you like, for you to think about. If you had a magic wand, what would the ideal career conversation look like in your organization? Who would be having it? Where and when would it take place in the organization? And what would be the output of it? And where would you keep that output, that live information? How would you make use of it? And also think about maybe what behaviors would you like to see start to shift? What is it that you want to see as that kind of progression and change within the organization when we think about career conversations and how people maneuver through the organization? So do you start to have a little think about what that might look like for you and what you've already tried and what's not shifted? Because that can really then help us to open up dialogues with you about what you can look at as alternatives and add-ons and different sort of approaches.
And in the next couple of episodes, we're going to really pull the curtain back and drill down into why this works and how you make it work for you. So over the next few episodes, we will be looking at what is a career conversation. We'll be giving you some lived examples of us having a career conversation in the agenda that we suggest to you. We'll be sharing with you a bit about how the equation came about, why it's a method rather than a model, and why structure is really important for having these more human conversations at work. And if it's ever felt like, we kind of know that career conversations be important, but maybe we felt like it's unclear or difficult, or you just wanted a practical approach that's easy for everyone to embrace, then you definitely want to keep listening. And each month we will also have an interview either with one of our clients or with someone who has an equally interesting perspective about how career conversations have made for or done for them in terms of good conversations and bad conversations in this space, just to really demonstrate what the benefits can be and also what the costs are of not doing this or doing it badly.
And remember, people find it harder to leave places that they really love, where they feel they belong, where they've got great, meaningful relationships with other people, where they can see the impact of their work and get great new experiences. So having a model for meaningful and impactful career dialogue can really grow your internal mobility, increase performance, improve your business results, and drive those engagement scores as well. So if you're already thinking, oh my gosh, I want to know more, and you're interested to make this sort of a reality in your firm, or if you want to explore the impact that improved conversations could have in your organization, then do feel free to sign up for a free rapid career conversation assessment with us at thecareerequation.com. And in that kind of 30-minute call, we'll explore with you your current situation, your philosophy, and start to identify some key areas for improvement that will work in that area of employee retention, alignment, and productivity. So once again, do take a look at that and book a free call with us at thecareerequation.com.
Well, there we go. It's a wrap for another day. So I hope that you've really taken away some of the key components of the things that you were doing really, really right, where this missed opportunity is, and started to seed some thoughts for yourself about where and how within your programs, within your dialogue, within your process, within your information capture about your people, a career conversation and the outputs from it might hugely add value to your retention strategy. So we look forward to catching you again soon.
Bye-bye for now.